thrilled to welcome Joanne Fawcett, a woman who has faced more life challenges than most could imagine, and she has emerged even stronger each time. After enduring 7 marriages that involved abuse, divorce, suicide, and even time spent as a prison wife, she has made the courageous decision to completely transform her life. She even left the Mormon church after 30 years, and she found her voice, her strengths, and even a newfound sense of purpose. In Joanne's first book, Midlife Magic, she offers powerful insights as well as lessons learned, showing us all that it's never too late to begin a new chapter. And so now, as she prepares to release her second book, Escaping Narcissistic Abuse, Joanne is here to share a journey of healing and resilience. We'll dive into her experiences with a 20-plus year marriage to a narcissist, her passion to find financial empowerment for women, self-care after toxic relationships, and so much more. And if that's not intriguing enough, her side passions include exploring UFO and paranormal experiences, which is my personal favorite. As a sci-fi geek and a longtime fan of the X-Files, she speaks internationally about the military's involvement with extraterrestrials. So please join me in welcoming Joanne to the podcast, a true survivor and an inspiring voice for transformation and hope. Awesome. So there's a few different points that I really want to get to, especially I was looking at your profile, looking at your paranormal experiences, and I'm a big fan of the X-Files law for probably 25 plus years. So I'm excited to kind of take a dive into that. But before we get into that, I want to thank you for joining me today. I want to kind of start off with, if you could tell us about how you changed your life after going through 7 marriages that included abuse, divorce, and how did you find the courage to start over and redefine your life's path?
Okay, let's see. I was married 6 times by the time I was in my early 40s, and most of them were to Mormon men because I was a Mormon for a very long time. And the goal is to find your right person and marry them forever and have lots of babies. And, none of that worked for me. I do have one child with one of my non-Mormon husbands, and he died when she was a baby. So, basically I've been a single mom forever. And after 6 abusive marriages, I met number 7, who is in prison, and we just started talking, and he was charming and amazing and all these wonderful things that seemed so different than all the other husbands. And I thought, oh, this is a really nice change. So I left the Mormon church after 30 years, and I started visiting him regularly at prison, and we courted for 5 years and then got married. And so that was one of my changes, because part of the things we were talking about, I learned about UFOs, and I reconnected with my gift to connect with spirits. So I have paranormal experiences. I learned about the fairy realm. I learned about magic, and that all really resonated with me. So basically, I changed my life from being a very active Christian to a very active non-Christian pagan witch. So that was a huge change, and that was great. And then before the COVID shutdown in 2020, I started realizing that husband number 7 wasn't everything I thought he was, and most of my needs were not getting met. And I also started to want to think about retirement. And so I started talking about that. It's like, well, with you in prison, how am I going to be able to retire? Can we downsize? He has this huge house in Marin County, California. It's like, how are we going to do this? And he always said he was going to come up with a plan, and he never really did. So, here we are almost 5 years later, and there was never a real plan. And then COVID hit, and I decided I didn't want to sit in the big creaking old house that was falling apart. I left it in the hands of a caretaker. I moved to Oregon to be near my family during COVID. And once I did, then things really started unraveling. And I really realized he is a flaming narcissist. So I changed my life again. It took three or 4 years to untangle from him. There's still one piece that's that's still not resolved, but I don't have to talk to him about it. So I've changed my life again, and really started standing up for myself, and really started embracing my gifts, and enjoying where I'm at and taking care of myself and realizing what I want for my life. And not from a selfish point of view, but really seeing things from different perspectives and seeing that I didn't have to stick to that person's agenda who was not supportive of anything I was really interested in. So I've changed my life twice and I couldn't be happier.
Awesome. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
What would you say the pivotal moment was that inspired you to maybe leave behind these relationships and create a new life?
When one husband is telling you they never loved you, that's a good sign you should probably leave. When the next husband kicks you out because he's suicidal, okay, you go along with that so that he doesn't kill you along with your unborn child. When another husband is hitting you and hitting your child more, that's a good time to leave. Those are pivotal moments. And the one thing I didn't do was, report that abuse when it was getting physical. I didn't report that abuse. And I encourage people to report it, even if you're not beaten to a pulp and end up in the hospital, you still need to report the abuse and take care of yourself and your kids. The other ones were when there's no communication or the man thinks he's always right and thinks he's in charge because you're in this church that tells you the man is the head of the household. And so it doesn't really matter what the woman wants or says. And he thinks he can be a brat towards your child. And the more often I was in these crappy relationships, the sooner I got out of them. Sometimes. And when the next one financially ruins you because you lent him money to invest that didn't work out and you knew better, and then now you're broke and you have to file bankruptcy, that's a good time to leave. And when the other husband says, oh, it's all your fault, I'm not going to therapy with you, that was a pretty pivotal moment. And then this last one, it took a little bit longer because as long as I was going along with the flow, then we were getting along really well. But as soon as I started standing up for myself and started saying what I wanted and various things, he just kind of rolled his eyes and thought I was nuts and thought everything was my fault. And this wife should be grateful that she's got this nice big house to live in, albeit the house is falling apart. It's over 100 years old and costing me lots and lots of money because in 25 years, he put $500 compared to the over $100,000 that I put into his house. So lots of those things. And when you're trying to talk about it and he says, well, you should have tried to be prettier, or you started your business in my house and then you turned your back on my needs. So all these little things, when it finally came down to it, made me realize I was making the right decision to leave him because the narcissist rarely changes. And even if he's not beating you to a pulp, or even beating you at all, he's beating you down with his words and making you feel like you're a piece of dirt and not worth anything. And I'm really tired of being hooked up with people who think I'm a second-class citizen and that I have no intelligence and that I have no rights. So, yeah.
Yeah, those are absolutely all very valid reasons. And I'm so glad you're out of that and finding your worth. That is amazing to hear.
Thank
I do
you.
want to touch on your experience after being within the Mormon church for 30 years,
Yes.
after you stepped away. Can you tell us what this journey was like for you and maybe how this influenced your approach to your life and relationships?
Well, it's interesting because unlike many people who leave the church, I didn't have a traumatic experience. I do realize I've met a lot of people who said they've been abused by church leaders or whatever. My problem was I just married really lousy husbands who happened to be Mormon, or I should say I married 5 Mormons who were really lousy husbands. And so I didn't have a problem with the church, but then when I was ready to go, it's like, oh, I just don't need it anymore. And yes, that was influenced by, I met this really cool guy who's not a Mormon, and I'd rather sit and visit him at prison for hours instead of spending hours at church. But we were talking about really interesting subjects, and I was learning to think along other lines than just what the Mormon church teaches you. And there's, a lot out there to learn that's interesting. And so, I kept in touch with some of the church people because I wasn't ready to totally cut them off, but I stopped going to church. But then I also asked them to help me move a couple of times. So, I didn't totally cut them off until I did. And then it was just like, I don't need this. But it was not, there was no anger and there was no, nobody tried to make me feel guilty. Every now and then the missionaries would find me and would stop by. And I said, well, that's great. If you want to practice, you can tell me your spiel, and I'm just going to sit here and nod my head and tell you I don't believe that anymore. But they only tried that a couple times. But it's to each his own. And I have different ways of thinking about a higher power these days. So
Awesome. Yeah. And I think so many of us can relate. I know for me personally, like I've gone through my own journey with spirituality, and I think it's a great thing where we're challenged to kind of like see what else is out there and what might be the right fit for us, especially if maybe we're grown up or grown into something that we're accustomed to, like from childhood. We don't know anything different. So yeah, I was just kind of curious to hear about that.
if I could add one thing,
Yeah.
it's like, and I know we're probably going to get into the paranormal stuff, but it's like, I have learned through talking with spirits and things that every church has their own version of what heaven and hell is going to be like. And the Mormons believe, there's 3 levels of heaven depending on how good you are. And you hope you get to stay married to your spouse forever and ever. And you're going to, anyway, whatever their story is. My vision of the spirit world, because I don't call it heaven or hell anymore. He's like, we can have hell right here on this physical plane, but there's a loving source of energy in the spirit world who is not the Christian God, the Jewish God, this God, it's like there's just one big, for lack of a better word, a big ball of loving energy. It's just love. And that energy created things, and you can envision them however you want them to look. But Jesus to me now is a great guy, but he's not the Jesus the Mormons talk about. So to me, it's all love and energy, and we all came from the same place. We're all going the same place, and there's all kinds of cool people and things and beings in the other plane after you pass this world. So
I love that interpretation. And that's kind of how I see it too, actually being a
cool.
highly spiritual person myself.
Uh-huh.
And a lot of people will say God, some people say the universe. So like whatever you want to call it, as you mentioned, I just love thinking of having that, like that positive energy, whatever that source or higher power, whatever that is for you, could look different to different people. But yeah, exactly. So yeah, as we're kind of talking a little bit about the paranormal and UFOs, can you share maybe a memorable encounter or tell us what maybe drew you into this area?
When I was married to husband number 3, he was a funeral director, and we were living in, Southern California, and he had to transport a body of a dead person to have a graveside service up in Northern California. So I went with him, and then I'm standing there being the supportive wife while he's giving a little service. And there's 2 or 3 elderly family members there. And that's cool. And all of a sudden I feel this really cool energy standing next to me. And I'm thinking, I think that's the little old lady who we're having the service for. And it's not like I can't see them. I can feel them. Sometimes I can see a shadow, but I can't see them like they would have appeared in life. I know other mediums and people can see the whole person, but I can't do that. But I could tell it was her, and she was fine. And I'm just going, hello, and how you doing type of thing. And that's happened a couple times at different funerals, because I used to sing at funerals, and then we lived in Ohio for a while, and his sister's mother-in-law passed, and I was singing. So I was up at the front of the chapel. I could sense her spirit like hovering over, like she was like upper left corner of the chapel, just enjoying her funeral. And I couldn't see her, but I could tell she was there. But I've been in historical places where I can sense the energy. And then when I took pictures with my black and white 35 millimeter actual film, real film, the film developed, then you could see like the distortions of, the ghostly energy. And that is so cool, because you're looking at a wall, you think, well, maybe something's there. And all of a sudden your film comes back. It's like, oh yeah, something's really there. So yeah, there's a beautiful, I don't know if you've been to it, but the USS Hornet is an aircraft carrier at stationed. It's just decommissioned, but I don't even know how to call it. It's birthed in Alameda, what was Alameda Naval Air Station. So in the California Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, and it's now a museum. So they've got all these historical displays on it, but it's really famous for its ghost activity. So if you want to go to some place that's really haunted, go there. And I've had lovely encounters there. There's can be some ghosts who are still there that may have died there very unhappy, very badly, may have tragic deaths. And, it was a military vessel. So, there was combat on that vessel. It's a famous ship historically. And now it's really famous for the ghosts because the ghosts who are on there, some of them died there and some of them just hear about it and want to go hang out there. And even my father-in-law was in the Air Force stationed in Marin County at Nevada, but he also worked a lot with Admiral Nimitz in the Navy there at Alameda. So the few times I've gone to the Hornet, I can feel his spirit there. And when I've been on the flight deck, I can feel his spirit standing right next to me, and a couple of psychics that have been with me. Oh, your father-in-law's right there. I go, I know, but they could see him. I could only feel him, but it was so cool. So, I've had great experiences like the former governor's mansion in Sacramento, the old one. And I think one of the, not Governor Newsom, but maybe one or two people before him actually went back there and lived again. But anyway, that's got some lovely ghost energy. And there's all kinds of historical places that do, but I've also been to many places in England where there's all kinds of cool ghost stuff. So it just kind of depends where you go. But I mean, even I lived in an apartment in Lodi, which is south of Sacramento. And I remember my dad, who died a long time ago, I remember his spirit hanging around in the corner. And it's like, oh, come on in, hi. I had a psychic friend who lived in San Francisco, and I was at her house one time, but I remember standing outside and just up the street, I could see the shadows of spirits, hanging out about near the garage doors of, a neighbor's house. And it's like, oh, this is so cool. So there's only been one scary experience I've had with that. Well, one time I've been in a castle with a psychic friend in England, and we could feel the energy was really negative. So, okay, now we got to go. They want us to leave this area. Another time on the Hornet, this was a medium friend of mine. She could see them as they were when they were alive. So there was a sailor who died tragically on the Hornet, and he hadn't crossed over. And so he was talking to her, which meant she was talking to me for him. But then he was trying to take over because he was so angry. And she was able to call his dad in from the other side and help, have him cross over. But that was a bit scary because I wanted to maybe hug her or calm. She wasn't upset, but it's like I wanted to maybe see what I could do to calm the situation down. She goes, no, don't touch me. And, she just needed to let him go on his way. And that was kind of unnerving, but most of my experiences have been pretty good.
Wow. No, I love hearing that because it's funny, besides my being an X-Files, sci-fi type of gal, my husband's also really into the paranormal and stuff too.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, when it comes to ghosts, Bigfoot, things like that. And his mom's family growing up, I forget, I think his mom was, I think, one of 6 or 7 kids. And
wow.
they grew up in Salinas in a haunted house. Yeah. And so he would hear stories about the ghosts that would touch their hair or touch in bed at night and different things like that. And so I really love hearing these types of stories. And I'd say for me personally, as far as in pictures and stuff, one of my late grandmothers had passed away back in 2016. And I remember there was this photo that's around somewhere, and it was taken inside my mom's house. And I swear there was some sort of ghost in that picture.
Very likely.
Yeah. And I'm there's I could see the silhouette inside the image. It was super weird. I hadn't seen anything like it before. And I swear it was my grandmother. I don't know how I knew that, but.
Well, I have a picture. Well, I don't know if I was allowed to keep it, but I had a picture of my father-in-law, my ex-husband's dad. Again, he was in the Air Force. And I've got there's a great picture of him standing next to his jet with his flight suit on. And he's got these goggles. And when I went to the Hornet, as I was about to leave one of the times, I just turned back and started taking pictures. And again, this is with the real film into the hangar bay, which was actually kind of dark. And I remember all the way across the room, it seemed like there was maybe a fire hose or something or an insignia. I remember there was, some kind of insignia on the wall when I got the film developed, I could vaguely see this image of this guy with his flight goggles. And it's like, oh, look, there he is. It's like, I knew that was my father-in-law. And it was so cool because it was early Air Force days. So, it wasn't like a dress uniform or anything, but it was like khaki browns or khaki tan, the Air Force guys would wear. And it was so cool. It was just because I knew that was him. And he's been with me a lot. Especially when I would go speak and stuff, he would always come hang out with me. And that was always, and I never met him in person. We're great friends now that he's dead, but he died before I met my ex. Yeah, we get along great.
Oh, that's amazing. And kind of transitioning into my next point, you're an international speaker on the military involvement with UFOs. Are there any insights that you feel that more people should be aware of?
Yeah. And it's interesting because I don't really speak about that so much anymore. A lot of that was before COVID, and especially because I was still with that husband number 7, but he and his dad were involved. They were both career military, both military intelligence, both did a lot of combat, did a lot of secret stuff. And they were highly involved with the military's space program. So, he couldn't tell me everything, but sometimes he did a lot of work for other agencies. There was an international intelligence agency there. When there's a threat against the whole planet, various countries who you think are at Cold War with each other get together to save the planet. But so he could tell me certain things that were not his US military things. So I learned about space missions. I learned about invasion fleets heading towards the planet. If you wanted to be scared, you don't know how many times we really should have been scared. And I shouldn't laugh. And there were a couple of big conferences on this planet where aliens would come and talk with the humans, the military and government leaders about, well, do we allow humans in space? Do we allow them to buy our used spacecraft? Will we allow them to defend their planet? How many humans can we kidnap in exchange for technology? So real live trading negotiations were happening. And you think of hundreds of species coming here. And, how are you going to house them? What are you going to feed them? How do you keep apart the ones that don't get along? How do you even talk to them? Because it's amazing because, they don't all speak English. Most of them don't. And most of them don't speak human languages. So you use grays for interpreters. You use the fairy realm for interpreters. And it's this whole new world. So like you've got a big party in Iran to cover up that over here underground or somewhere else nearby, we're having a treaty conference with a bunch of aliens. And it's just amazing. It's amazing because I have great respect for the military, especially more now that I know what they've had to keep hidden from the public, how active alien visitations and kidnappings and stuff are. But, there's a lot of good coming. I mean, we are allies with certain alien races that help us protect the planet. And there are some who are just here for peaceful reasons. And not all aliens are bad. And a lot of them are pretty cool. And so I learned a lot of cool things. And it's like, I want to sit down and have tea with a bunch of them. So that's what I still do talk about. I talk about the friendly species and the spirituality of many of them and how we're all connected as galactic beings and how many of them want us to be their allies and communicate with us. So that's kind of where I'm going.
Oh, I love it. And it's funny because I know so many people, of course, are skeptical about aliens, but it's hard for me to imagine that because it's like the universe is so vast. Like, how could there not be alien life?
Exactly.
So that's really awesome.
And the thing is, there are hundreds of species and the military knows about them and the military knows where a lot of them live. They're not going to tell you, but they do know. And again, most of them don't look like humans. If your planet or your home world is a watery based place, you're going to be a whale or a jellyfish. Yeah. I have a friend who's a channeling medium and he knows he's from a whale-like species, is his star family. And he loves to go to the beach. That's his happy place because he just knows that's the star family he came from. But and there are very many species, the friendly species. And what I like to tell people is, people say reptilians. Well, there's lots of different kinds. There's lots of cats. There's dogs. There's all kinds of different things. And they've been around way longer than we have. And most of them don't think we're worth two twigs to rub together, two pennies to rub together, whatever that cliche is, because their civilizations are so much older than ours. So they've developed way more than we have. But just like we need to respect other people here on this planet, we need to respect the beings that are in space. And not all of them want to be our friends. I'm very clear on that. And many of them will work with certain countries on this planet who want to do others harm. But there are many friendly species. So I want to meet more of those. I mean, I haven't met any of them, but I want to.
Yeah, same. And it's funny because I think a lot of people, especially on the topic of aliens, will all like assume that they're here to either do us harm or they're like this rather like, and it's like, I feel like very one dimensional, but as like you said, there could be so many different species there could be some wanting to do us harm while others want to be our friend. But I think so many people, they're like classify them into this one group and this is their agenda. And so, yeah.
Well, and they all have different agendas. And it's interesting because I correct people all the time. It's like, oh, the reptilians. I go, there are many species of reptilians.
Yeah.
Some are very negative and we should stay far, far away. And some of them do work closely with certain government leaders on this planet. And when you see huge incidents or terrorism events, I'm totally convinced they're usually a bad alien working with the humans on that. I could go on and on about that, but I don't want to scare everybody.
No, I love this subject.
But there's also some friendly cats and there's some dogs there's a dog species that is here just to export commodities and sell them to their clients in space. Hershey chocolate is probably still in business because the aliens love chocolate. What can I say? But the chocolate world or the chocolate industry is still thriving because there's lots of aliens that love our chocolate.
Oh, that's so funny.
Yeah.
I never thought about that, the chocolate thing. That's pretty cool. I'm going to have to add that to my
chocolate. And, they like jewelry and Rolex watches and silk scarves and things like that. And certain reptilians, that have really sharp claws. I don't know if they go to a nail salon, but they do like to have somebody decorate their nails with little decals and things and jewels and all kinds of stuff,
Yeah. That's not too much different from us.
There's high romance in the reptilian world, let me tell you.
So pivoting a little bit, I want to talk about your books because you have two of them.
Midlife Magic
and Escaping Narcissistic Abuse. Would you be able to tell us about those?
Yes. The first one I started before COVID and I finished it during COVID, and it's called Midlife Magic, The Journey of Joanne Richards, because that was my former married name. And again, it talks about my childhood and why I got married so many times and how I left the Mormon church. And then it talks about all the 7 husbands. Each of the first 6 got their own chapter. And they're all very cutely named based on what kind of personality he was. And it was basically, here's how we met. Here's what happened. Here's where it went wrong. Here's what I learned. So I'm all about learning from our mistakes. So I didn't write these books coming from a victim standpoint. And then number 7 got 3 chapters because we were getting along at the time. And it was like, well, here's how we met. Here's what it's like to be married to somebody in prison. Because, it wasn't all bad, but there's certain things you need to think about before you just jump into it. And then it was like, and how he introduced me to these other things and, like his military stuff. And I just probably touch on his case a little bit. And then it was how I got into UFOs and all my woo stuff. So it's basically, my magical practice and how I use my intuition to protect myself and to guide me, and my paranormal experiences. And I go into my UFO sightings and things like that. And some very special experiences I've had with deer, animals. I'm very close to the deer world. And then that pivoted into book 2, The Prince Was Wrong, Leaving the Narcissist Behind, because as I said, once I left him and realized, oh, he's a narcissist, that's the name I need to put on this problem. And I started going to therapy. And one of the editors for my first book, she also left an ex-husband. And we finally met in person. She said, "Oh, that's what your second book should be about." I'm going, "Oh yeah, right." And then eventually, yeah, that's what I did. And I started making notes, and I moved from California to Oregon. And most of the time, like for the first year of COVID, I couldn't visit. Then eventually there was some visiting, and eventually the family visits were restored. But we had letters. We had like 3 years of, I mean, we wrote all the time, the whole 25 years I knew him. But especially those last 3 years was like all the ups and downs about how we were trying to figure out a relationship and could we even get it back on track, and me trying to stand up for myself and tell him what was wrong, and him telling me I was crazy, and a good wife should do this and a good wife should do this. And it just drove me nuts. And I was going to say, it's like, I asked him, "Well, why didn't you support my book?" "Well, because it wasn't good timing for me." And I was like, uh-huh. And then I kept asking him numerous times. It's like, "Well, why can't you tell me like what you like about me?" Because usually when you like your partner and stuff,
Right.
you often tell them over time, "Well, I like this about you. I like that about you. I love this about you. It's like, this is why I married you, blah, blah, blah." He could never tell me, except that it was good for an inmate to have a wife. Okay, I knew that. That's why basically we got married, because after 6 husbands, I didn't really need to get married. I was in my 40s. I wasn't going to be having any more kids, but he could never tell me why he liked me or loved me or why we got married beyond that it was a political move for someone in prison. And he goes, "Well, guys just don't do that. You should just know that if I'm with you, I love you." And it's like, yeah, that's not good enough anymore. And, he always had an excuse. So this book is lots of quotes about examples of his narcissistic behavior. And I think it worked out well. And then I go into, what was basically the final straws, and, what I was doing to wake up and how I was taking care of myself. And the actual divorce process, it's pretty easy in Oregon if nobody's contesting anything. So I was grateful for that. And it was funny because I went on a cruise in May of 2023, and I was really starting to get the notes together, because I'd wake up and it'd be early and it wasn't time to meet my sister for breakfast. So I sit and write, and that was great. And I almost had the whole thing written by the end of the cruise, but it's basically how crappy it was, how we tried to work things out, how we were never going to work it out, how the divorce happened, how it was still untangling. And then basically what I did to protect myself and save myself and become a sane person again. A lot of self-care and a lot of, you need to set boundaries. And it was interesting because the last time I saw him, which was, I think, April of 2023, we were in person just in the visiting room. And I said, "You were very mean. I don't remember that." I go, "Well, I have it all in writing." So and now it's all in a book. And there's also a healing journal, which is a separate book, but it's called Pathways to Healing. So, I've got some writing prompts and stuff in there so people can use that as a companion tool if they so desire, to help them. So, yeah.
Oh, I love that. And I feel like so many women especially can relate to some of these things like that guys say. And I don't know, sometimes I think there are certain things that guys say that it seems almost universal way language that guys use. And
Right.
for example, like I know there's still different types of love languages
Right.
out there, right? And so like my husband, for example, like his is very much touch. And so mine is kind of somewhere in between like the words of affirmation and gifts.
Right. Uh-huh.
And so like sometimes I'll find myself asking my husband, because he's not very like forward with coming out with, "Oh, I like X, Y, and Z about you." And so like
Right.
we've had sessions in therapy where we've kind of like done some exercises and brainstorming activities.
Uh-huh.
He can come up with things, but like on the fly, I'll ask things and either his answer will be, "I don't know, I'm not very good at this," or it'll be like, "Oh, you try hard." I'm like, "Okay, well, at least that's something." um, so yeah, we've been married for a long time. So I know
Have you?
well,
You
yeah.
you sound very young to have been married a long time.
Yeah, thank you.
And it's a process of really
Yeah.
learning, because his love language was clearly different than mine. And he was not very physical. And it's like, could you just hold my, it's like he would hold my hand sometimes, or he'd put his arm around me when we were watching a movie. But if we were in the public visiting room, he was always holding my hand, because he wanted to make people think we were this wonderful couple. But it is, you have to compromise and learn about the other person's love language. And, there's a metaphysical woman I know that does like speed dating, but it's not like to match you up, but it's like to get you practicing real conversations with people. Yeah. So it's like good, deeper questions. And so I carry those around with me, and I was using them on different guys I was starting to date. And it's like, and then this woman I know in the Bay Area, I think she's a therapist, and she created this beautiful deck of cards called Big Love or Love Big, one or the other, but they're very colorful, and they have like conversation starter things on each card. Like, here's this. What do you think about it? And so there's ways for couples to practice those kind of things, especially if you're in the beginning of a relationship and you really want to know, more than what's your birthday and what's your zodiac sign. So
exactly.
And for me these days, it's like, well, how spicy do you like your food? Because I do not like spicy food.
Honestly, I think my husband and I'll say, are each other's first. And so honestly, I think something like that probably would have been beneficial for us being each like new to a relationship and just kind of learning things for the first time. So yeah, I highly recommend for any of our listeners.
So how long have you been married? Can I ask?
Yeah, sure. So we've been married for 16 years and together for 18.
Oh, good for you.
Yeah.
But it's never too late to rekindle things and find new things and spice things up. And even if that's what you do for your date night, and make sure you're having date nights, not just you, but all of us. Or like do a little weekend getaway and do some of these, sit down and hold hands and talk and, have some chocolate and talk. And I think it's really important to keep things going. And it's not always about physical intimacy, because intimacy comes in all forms.
Yeah, especially now, like with smartphones and computers and social media and everything like that. I feel like we have to be more intentional about like, okay, we're going to like put our phones away somewhere.
Yes.
Or something like that, and dedicate that time, because it's really easy. And I think for many people might experience this, for so much of our attention to like, if we're eating dinner together, be looking at our phones or something like that. Or
I know.
There's all these distractions.
Yeah. And, it's like my grandkids are like 16 to 22. So they're basically all grown. But we have a family tradition ever since they were little, really young, that we go to we try to every year to go to high tea together. And now that, they're all older and everybody's got phones, I go, put the phones away. Well, what about, can I take a picture? I go, take a picture and then put your phone away, because grandma we're not doing tea with the phones on the table. And so they do respect that. And we dress up and we have a lovely time, and and we talk to each other. So, we're not married to each other, but we talk to each other. It's family, because we don't get to see each other that often. Right. And, it was very interesting today, because my grandchildren are in 3 different locations, and their mom right now is in Mexico on a business trip. So they're all on this group chat about the election. So it was really nice to see them communicating their feelings, and we're not going to go there, but it was just really nice to see that they were really checking in with each other and stuff. And even like my 70th birthday was over the summer, and we went to a nice restaurant, all of us, and my sister came from California. And I said, okay, except for pictures, put your phone away. It's like, that's, grandma, if we're having a really fancy or nice, if it's a big celebration, we're putting our phones away.
That would be a deal for me, because I'm a foodie and I love taking pictures of food. But as you said, that works for me. Take my picture and
yeah. And we all did that. I mean, I was taking pictures because, my family was all together, and my sister, I don't get to see her that often. I see her several times a year, but it's not like she lives here. So it's like, yes, we took our pictures and then we put our phone away and we were talking to each other. So, that's just so important, and showing interest in each other. So one of the things I had to do as part of my untangling and taking care of myself was really coming up with a list of what do I want? And again, not from a selfish point of view, but what do I want? So what are the non-negotiables as I learn to explore new relationships? And I learned really fast. It's like, okay, no, we didn't go past the coffee date. No. I'm old enough and I've been through this too many times to want to keep making the same mistakes. And I, at my age, I should be able to get most of the things I want, or, live by myself.
Oh, exactly.
I'm very transparent and I'm very open about what I believe in and what I feel is important. And it's not like I'm not able to compromise, but I also want to find somebody. It's like, I'm very clear. It's like, I'm not a Christian. And if you are, that's great, but that's really not going to work for me. So I have to be very clear about, I'm a witch. I'm going to have an altar. I'm going to meditate. I'm going to do these things. If that's going to bother you, then this isn't going to work. I have an inside cat. If that bothers you, this isn't going to work, you know? So you have to know what's really important to you and know where you can compromise and what is non-negotiable, and find that person who's basically on the same level, same plane with you.
I can totally relate with that because I have a total of 8 cats. 6 are ours, 2 are my mom's. And it's funny, before, like years ago, my husband grew up, he was only raised with dogs, but he always liked cats. So that was my favorite. He just loved animals. And so now if I were in like the dating world, that again, like you said, that'd be non-negotiable. You don't like cats? Well, guess that's a no then.
Well, and again, one of my coffee dates it became very apparent. He said, yeah, no pets inside the house. I go, well, forget it. Obviously,
Yeah.
Because my cat has, number one, when I got him in California, in Marin, there's hills and there's critters and there's things that eat your cat. So it's like,
Right.
No. And he has health problems. So no, he's staying inside.
Right.
It's just funny. Some of the certain things that people would be not okay. It's like, okay, I'm okay with you being a witch, but you married somebody in prison. That's just, ew. It's like, okay, you're okay with, you don't mind the first 6, but the one in prison bothers you. It's been an interesting journey. And, I've started dating a really nice guy, and we're actually going to introduce our pets to each other this week. So, but my cat, he's got a dog. My cat's never been around dogs. So we'll see. If it goes badly, I'll be heading home. But
it's kind of like bringing the kids home for the first time.
Exactly. It's not that we would be breaking up over it, but it's like, I don't want to torture the cat by saying this for hours and him just hating the dog. But his cat's used to dog. I mean, his dog is used to cats. So,
that's
good. But yeah, it's like introducing your kids to the new guy, or his kids and your kids. It's like, ew.
Oh my gosh. I got a funny story for you.
Okay.
My dad, he's been married twice, but he's been in many different relationships. And I remember when my brother and I were younger, he had, I don't know how serious this relationship was at the time. I think he'd only maybe gone on a couple dates, but he had a lady come over, and long story short, he did not tell her he had kids. So she came to the door, and basically, I think that was the last time I saw her. She was like, oh, I didn't know he had kids.
Oh gosh. And there's a difference between telling the person that you have kids and not. It's like, you might not introduce them, because I don't think you should introduce your kids to every person you just have 1 or 2 dates with. The people should know you have kids, it's like, and it's in my profile. It's like, I have a grown daughter. I've got grandkids. It's like, because they're an important part of my life. If you don't want to deal with it's not like they live with me, so we don't have to have that problem. Right. I don't live with them, but they're part of my life. So family celebrations kind of happen.
Right. Yeah.
I'm sorry you went through that.
Yeah, no, I just thought I was sure, but that's pretty funny.
And did you ever tell your dad after the date had left, it's like, I don't really like that person, don't see them anymore?
Honestly, I don't remember. My brother probably did, knowing him.
Yeah, my daughter, unfortunately, she really didn't tell me that. And that would have saved a few problems. But it was interesting. There was this one guy, we were chatting online, and we never did meet in person, thankfully. But he's in his, I think he's in his early 50s, we'll just say, because I've found a lot of people online lie. So whatever, he's considerably younger than me, because I'm now 70. I've got a 5-year-old and like a teenager. It's like, and what part of why do you want to date me? And then he started lying later down the road. And it's like, Yeah, okay, this isn't going to work, and I don't want to raise your 5-year-old. Come on.
Right.
If you even have children, I don't want to raise your I don't want to raise them if they're teenagers. I don't want to raise your children. I'm a great grandma, but I don't want to live with teenagers or little kids in the house. It's like, why should I do that at my age? Come on.
No, that's totally valid.
It's great if you want to date older women, but not if you've got little kids living with you at home all the time. No, that's just no. Yeah. I'm way too old. I could be their grandma. So
Yeah, it is funny, like kind of going back to my dad. I don't know why he wasn't transparent about having kids. Because I know for some people, like it's a deal breaker. Like they just, especially like even if they are younger. My dad's also, I mean, he's dated people like that are about 20 or so years younger, and like he's he's in a part of about 10 to 13 years ago. His ex-wife was about 20 years younger, and she had wanted another kid. She had gotten pregnant pretty young, I think at 18, and she became a mother again at 40. So she had wanted another kid at some point in time. My dad, being in his 50s, was like, no, that ship kind of sailed for me.
I'm
And
done.
so I'm like, I'm like, you should be transparent. Like, back when growing up, say you have kids, and now just being like, I'm done with that. That part of my life is over,
Yeah, those are definite. And again, even if you're dating somebody, because my daughter's boyfriend, he has young kids, again, hers are all older. So she's almost an empty nester, but his kids aren't even in high school yet. It's an interesting transition for her to be dating somebody with younger kids, but they're making it work. So
yeah,
it's all good. And and they don't live together yet. So it's all good. And at least they all get along. So that's really nice. But yeah, I could do a whole podcast and a whole book on the perils of online dating. It's amazing. how awful it is.
yeah, absolutely. I can imagine. I honestly, since my husband and I have been together since like the mid 2000s, sometimes I've been on like Bumble BFF, Craigslist Platonics, like whenever I've moved looking for friendships and stuff like that. Oh my gosh, but I couldn't even imagine like navigating the dating world online, like just from like what I've like hear and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's terrible.
I was told you to do that.
Yeah, I will admit the guy that I'm dating now, I did meet him on a dating app. That was just a stroke of luck because most of the guys, and we are getting along very well. So it's very nice. But most of the guys I've met, more guys than not, that either are totally fakes or they're really liars if you get to the even phone call position, and there are so many scammers. And even the guys are having trouble with the women, wanting money or this I want cryptocurrency. It's like, or it's like, do you have to show me your big fish or your giant motorcycle or your tent? Because I'm not going to go camping at my age. So, these are things I have to ask. It's like, okay, are you expecting to go backpacking and tent camping? Because that's not really going to work for me. I'm active and I love cruising and I love walking, but it's like, I'm not going backpacking and you're not getting me to sleep on the ground. So no.
No, that's totally valid.
I watch you fish. I don't want to clean your fish. I'll read my book on the shore while you fish and I'll play cheerleader. But yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because I've never been like tent camping, and my husband kind of grew up doing that.
Me too.
But now that we're like, I'm in my mid 30s and he's in his early 40s, we recently, about a few months back, decided we're going to do like kind of upgrade because we wanted to do truck camping.
Okay.
So a lot of people say, well, no, that's not really camping,
Good enough. Glamping.
Yeah, exactly. And so he's like, well, at my age, I want to be comfortable.
Exactly.
The same because I have a bad back. So I'm like, we compromise, like that works for me too. So let's go.
When we were young, that's all my parents could afford for vacation basically was tent camping. There were 4 of us and we did a lot of it. We went to the World's Fair in Seattle in 1962. So I've already said I'm 70. So that was our fanciest vacation because that involved hotels. Other than that, it was all tent camping and water skiing and stuff. So that was okay. But, and so my sister obviously grew up that same way, and she's gone camping a lot. But now, she's a little older than I am. And so she's gone from tent camping to a trailer, to a fifth wheeler, to a really nice motor home now. And they go on a lot of cruises. So it's like, okay, now we're talking. This is the way to do retirement. So
Ah, that's awesome.
yeah.
Yeah. So before we close out, would you be able to share with us what you think that are some of the essentials for
Yeah.
those who might be going through something similar in terms of
Yeah.
narcissistic abuse, or maybe they're leading their finances for the first time and trying to navigate that journey outside of a toxic relationship?
Yes. And, I am a bookkeeper by profession. So, and I've helped a few women clients who's like all of a sudden their husband's either dead or divorced and they don't know how to handle the money.
Right.
And my mom was the same way when my dad died. It's like, well, yeah, but you guys paid bills together every month. I was allowed to put the check in the envelope. It's like, oh, good golly. It's like, so find a way, get some help to become more financially savvy. There's classes out there and I can help people set up a little budget or, but get some help. There's ways to get free help or really low cost help. And self-care is so important and it doesn't have to be expensive. Yes, I do get a massage every month and I still talk to my therapist, but my best form of self-care and meditation is walking every day in my neighborhood. And I walk a lot, even when it snows and rains, just not when it's really icy. But then, again, if you're being physically abused, call the cops. Don't think he's, loves you so much that, he's going to stop, because he won't. And don't wait till your child is in the hospital or you're in the hospital or one of you is dead. Just call the cops and get out of the situation. You don't have to live with a narcissist. You don't have to live with a toxic partner. You can create a better life for yourself. And my mantra is, you can change your life at any age. I've done it dramatically twice, and you can make a better life for yourself. And there's a lot of support if you don't know how to start over or you don't know how to take care of yourself. So even if somebody just wanted to email me or have a Zoom chat for some peer support, I'd be happy to do that. There's so much support out there, and we need people to know that they're not alone. So get the help that you need. And you can do it. You can find ways to do it. If you can't get away from that person, you can find ways to do it and they don't have to know.
Yeah, absolutely. And something I haven't touched on is actually my mom went through something similar, partially why she's living with us now.
Right.
Yeah, she left a toxic relationship that involved narcissistic abuse after 30 years. So she was with him since I was really young, like 2 or something like that. So 30 plus years they were together. And about 3 years ago is when they formally divorced, and she moved in with us. And now she's in her late 50s, trying to learn and navigate a new life, because pretty much since before she was with him, she was with my dad. So she immediately went from my dad to him. And so pretty much she is discovering herself for the first time as a person. So
is she doing better?
She definitely is. Yeah. So she's really learning how to take care of herself. She's lost a lot of weight, and she loves going on walks too, pretty much daily. And it really helps her mental health as well. So
yeah, it's amazing. I lost, my weight's always gone up and down, but it's like when I left him, I know at least I lost 30 pounds because the stress isn't there or is not as there. It's like, and then my good friend who also knows the ex, because he was in prison with him, but now he's out and totally free and perfect and wonderful. But so we're really good friends. He goes, you lost 170 pounds. It's like, yeah, I did, didn't I? But if your mom needs somebody to talk to, now you can connect her with me. So,
absolutely.
if she needs a new friend, I've made new friends because we've all suffered the same thing.
Yeah. And it's been a pleasure having you on here. I really loved our conversation.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Would you be able to tell our listeners where they can learn more about you, connect with you, and maybe purchase your books?
The website is joannefawcett.com. And the books are on Amazon and all the online platforms, and also through my website. So I've got hard copies here if people want a signed copy, so they can hook up with me and I'll, send it to them and stuff like that. So those are the best ways. And I'm also on Facebook and LinkedIn and Instagram just under Joanne Fawcett. So There's all kinds of ways to get a hold of me and connect with me and chat. And like I said, I'm happy to offer support if somebody just needs a listening ear or a virtual shoulder to cry on. And if you're in Portland, it doesn't have to be virtual.
Awesome. I'll make sure I get those down in the show notes. Thank you so much.
Thank you.